Your number one takeaway over the weekend, Ramie.
He's right. He's right. I mean, I my belief in that keeps on growing and becoming strengthened by things like we saw this weekend. Because Nick and I've brought up this point a number of times. This weekend was the perfect illustration of it. This team has a lot of different ways to, and a lot of different guys who can beat you. Yeah. That was and it's the first one I think that I can remember. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's the first win that we've seen like that. The one they got yesterday over the Bulls. That was just ugly. And some of that is not to the credit of the Kings. You know what I mean? There was sloppiness in yesterday. There were 35 combined turnovers and 68 three-pointers attempted. Only 22 made in that game yesterday.
I think 10 of 11 of the first shots, 10 of the 11 first shots taken by the Kings were threes yesterday. It was madness. They just kept hoisting.
But they won an ugly game, and they did it by holding the Bulls to 44% shooting in the fourth. That's the lowest they've held an opponent to in the fourth quarter this year. They won an ugly sort of knockdown, drag out game, and one that the Bulls kind of they made a little push there in the fourth quarter, and the Kings put an end to it and put an end to any hopes that the Bulls had of winning that game. That's what continues to impress me about this team is the versatility and the multitude of ways that they can beat you.
Yeah, defensively won that game yesterday for them. I mean, look, yesterday you walk in. If I told you that the Kings were going to shoot 30% from three-point land, that Fox and Domas were going to score a combined 27 points, and that they were going to turn the basketball over 18 times, there's no way on the second game of a back-to-back you would imagine they would win that game. And that's precisely what they did. Shooting 30% from three, Fox and Domas combined for less than 30 points. They had 18 turnovers. They still won the game. And it was because of great defense in long stretches and overall really good defense. KZ Okpala, shout out to him. He was tremendous against DeMar DeRozan in that first half. He did not give DeMar any space whatsoever. And I talked about it last week, Ramie, while you were out. You know, if you look at the 5-game sample sizes, right, if you go 5 games, and you go through the first 20, what you saw was progress defensively. Defensive rating continued to improve with every 5 games that you went through. And today, right now, as we talk on this show, this defense is 16th in the NBA in defensive rating.
That happened fast.
Yes. I mean, 16th. You go back 2 weeks ago, they were 25th, 26th. They have made a significant jump in the last couple of weeks. And if you look last year, they were 27th in defensive rating with a rating of 114.8. This year, they're at 112. And Will Zimmerly tweeted about this yesterday. The defensive rating against the Bulls yesterday was under 100, 98.1, which is just nuts. It's their third game in a row with a defensive rating of 100 or less. And over the last 7 games, if you take them over the last 7 games defensively, their defensive rating is 106.1, which would be the best mark in the NBA.
It's impressive what we're seeing.
In the upper quartile of winners, we're in the top quartile of that upper quartile.
That's what I was trying to say, but I couldn't get it out, because I'm not as smart as Jim Irsay.
Of course.
But it's impressive, man, what we're seeing from this team and the improvement that we're seeing defensively and how quickly it's happening. They climbed those ranks pretty quick. And hey, that means that they can fall down the ladder just as quickly with a few bad games. You know what I mean? But I think that we're seeing some real signs, and the more that we see, the larger the sample size gets and the more ways that we see them beat teams and we see the defense get better, the more that you have to say what Malik Monk said right there in that clip that we heard. They are legit. I think they're legit, man.
Yeah, and it really begins with De'Aaron Fox, who has been better defensively. I would not say he's been great defensively, but he's been good to pretty darn good for most of this season. I don't know how many blocks he's had the last couple of games. It seems like he's racking up the blocks on 3-point attempts and jump shots, but he's been good, and here was Mike Brown talking about just that.
In his position, he's got to set the tone for us, and he has. And he set the tone yesterday. He set the tone today. And in my personal opinion, I think that's what helped us throughout the course of the game on the defense end of the floor. And if we can get that from him night in and night out, his scoring is going to be there. He can score in so many different ways. Just staying consistent on the defensive end of the floor, being a presence is what we need from him more than anything else.
You know, this is what we expected from Mike Brown. He's a defensive coach, defensive mind. And we said it might take time. It's starting to really come together for them on that end of the floor, which makes them incredibly dangerous because of their offensive ceiling. The other part of the weekend that jumped out at me was Keegan Murray. And I've talked about Keegan struggling. You know, I called him out last week. He had a long stretch of games where he just wasn't doing enough. And I thought this weekend was the best 2 games we've seen him play back-to-back and maybe since the beginning of the season. He averaged 17 points a game over the weekend. He shot 54.5% from the floor. He shot 46% from 3. He looked much more comfortable yesterday from three-point land. But aside from the counting stats and his shooting, Ramie, what stood out to me about Keegan over the weekend was his activity level. He was much more active on the glass. He was much more active, especially on Saturday. He was attacking the glass and grabbing rebounds. Defensively, it looked like he had his head on a swivel and for the most part knew exactly what was happening, where he needed to be and what he needed to do. And he was cutting to the basket. I love to see Keegan Murray cutting to the basket, getting the ball and going up to the rim and attempting free throws. He had 5 free throws on Saturday. Now, that might not sound like a lot, but frankly, it's his season high. He had 5 free throws against the Clippers. Now, I don't think he had any yesterday, but he was still cutting. He was still trying to attack. And I think if he continues to do that and he keeps his activity level up, we will see a much better Keegan Murray than we've seen the last month.
I'm glad you brought those 2 guys up back to back, Fox and Murray, because as fans, we get wrapped up in excitement, especially when a season gets started the way that this season has gotten started. And that can do 2 things. You can let your optimism and your excitement get the best of you and get away from you, or when you see things that aren't going so well, or maybe a couple games in a row that don't go well, panic can set in. Right. You know what I mean? You go, yep. Oh man, it was so good, and now this is it. This is where it all falls apart, especially when you have the history that the Kings have. We need to remind ourselves as the season goes on. First of all, De'Aaron Fox was probably never going to be the MVP of the NBA. You know what I mean? Like we should probably remember that, and we should have remembered at the time that there was some regression that was bound to happen. You know what I mean? And again, I know he's been dinged up. I know he was sick, and that probably accounts for some of the struggles recently when it comes to scoring, but also some of this was just bound to happen. Yeah. You know what I mean? We should have known it was going to come. And when Keegan Murray gets off to a slow start or has a slow stretch, we got to remember this guy is a rookie, and there are going to be struggles and there are going to be up and downs. That progress isn't linear when you're talking about any rookie or any young developing player in any sport. So I think the arrow pointing up now for Keegan Murray and the arrow pointing down for De'Aaron Fox, for whatever conversations and panic we might have or excitement we might have when talking about those guys, this is all par for the course. And the fact that they keep finding ways to win games is what tells me this is a really good basketball team.
He's Ramie. I'm Nick. It's Cattles and Ramie. YouTube.com, Sactown Sports 1140. Check out the channel and like it to help us out. Again, it's YouTube.com, Sactown Sports 1140. The Josh McDaniels Revenge Tour. It continues. We'll talk about it next.